speakers this evening really needs no introduction, but I'm going to make one anyway. So, a native of West Virginia with a degree in speech pathology from the West Virginia University and a graduate certification in paralegal studies from George Washington University. She has married a U.S. Marine colonel who's retired. After moving 7 times in 10 years, our speaker and her husband settled in Maine when he retired. Their moves took them to various parts of the country, and she developed a love of the variety of flowers and plants that she encountered in their travels. To learn more about that, she took landscape classes and horticulture classes, and when they moved to Harpswell, she eventually joined the Garden Club in 2004. And in 2009, she became our Garden Club president, served 3 years at that position. She's also chaired a variety of committees over the years, and she's currently chairman of our awards committee, and she coordinates our work with the chapel on the grounds of the Brunswick Naval Station. She's also, at the present time, the president of the Garden Club Federation of Maine. She helps with our club's website. And in her spare moments, she researched the history of the Harpswell Garden Club. Ms. Suzanne Bushnell.
Before I start, I want to thank, there's a lot of people that helped me with this, including Ken and Annette Dunn, who, if you ever have the chance to go to Ken and Annette's house, they have got the most incredible array of everything you'd ever want, because I just called her up to say, Annette, do you have any white gloves? And it's like, do I have white gloves? And so come on over and see what I do have, because I told her I wanted this to have a vintage theme to it. And so the costumes you see up here are from Annette and Ken's collection. The antique easels you see over there are from their collection. The hat, the green hat she got from Maine State Music Theater because she volunteers at the costume department. The blue hat is Ruthie Weeks' old hat, which she resurrected from somewhere, Ruthie. And the blue hat in the corner is my hat. I wanted to bring it because that's the one I wore at my installation as state president. It's kind of like a Kentucky Derby hat, but I found it at the Boston Flower Show. And if you've had a chance to look at the table, there's this is just scratching the surface of things for 85 years. I did a lot of research really with the Maine Historic Preservation Commission, which put me on to the Portland Press Herald, who told me to go to the Portland Public Library, and then using their microfiche and a wonderful reference librarian helped me find some articles that I had a year for, but I didn't have the date. I have over there also the most recent trophies that we won for, I put us in for a national award and a state award for historic preservation for the 65 years that we have preserved the Union Church, so that's over there. And thanks to Peggy Chandler, who got a call from Linda DeHaan, who was moving, and Linda was going through her old desk, and she found the National Register of Historic Places document that belongs with the Union Church. So that's where that came from. So between Mary Maroney and Ruthie, those are Ruthie's yearbooks over there. Linda Clement, who gave me some photos, June and Ann Finney, who gave me some things, and of course Ann Stanwich brought some memorabilia from her dad, Currier McEwen. We've got just a collection of incredible things. And one other thing I want to say is those old articles that you see on the antique easels, I kind of fell into those, including this one, because the Augusta Nature Club that group was cleaning out their attic and found 2 big boxes that belonged to the Garden Club Federation of Maine. All articles from the 1930s. So our membership chair went through them. She says, I have one from Harpswell. So that's the first one from 1937 over on that first easel. So these things are very interesting. If you haven't had a chance to look at them, I hope you'll have a chance later on. And I want to thank Dave Chipman for being here tonight from Harpswell Community TV. Thank you, Dave. And Sherry Holt for setting this up. Okay, I think we're ready to start. As I said, I started this project more than a year ago when I was doing the research to put us in for the National and State Award for Historic Preservation. And as I started digging, I started finding a lot of interesting things about our club. And so that's when I decided this story had to be told. So when you approach a project of this magnitude, you have to really decide how you want to do it. And so what I've done is to try and group our projects together. And at the same time, I've kind of woven them into the 85 years that we've been a garden club. What I thought I'd do is kind of set the stage of what the times were like in the 1930s. So you can see here that when our club was formed, we were still going through the Depression, so it was a pretty grim time in our country. And this particular slide in the next one, my husband Bill and I had the chance to be in Austin, Texas at the LBJ Presidential Library. And when you go into the entryway, they have a timeline that goes all the way around their foyer. And so I found this, I saw it, and I said, oh, I gotta have this for my presentation. So anyway, 1930s, you can see some of the things that were happening. And then they happened to have one 1931, and you can see, just to kind of give you a feel for what was going on. The Empire State Building opened, and I didn't realize this, but the Star Spangled Banner in 1931 became the national anthem. So a little history lesson tonight as we go along here. Before I go too far down the road, let's see how the Harpswell Garden Club came to be. From this slide, you're going to see that it was a husband and wife team who decided to put a garden club together, and it was Mr. and Mrs. James Bogie. Bodge. Thank you, Ruthie. They actually lived in New York, but they summered in Harpswell. And they wrote to their friends here in Harpswell and asked them if they thought it was a good idea to form a garden club. And of course, the answer was yes. And so this is what happened. A planning meeting was held at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Sam Alexander. And as I go through this presentation, you're going to see a lot of names that ring a bell in Harpswell history. Our first regular meeting, May 25th, 1931, and there were 29 charter members. Now, the meeting was held at the Improvement Hall. And for those of you who don't know what the Improvement Hall was, it's today's Scout Hall. Yeah, I didn't know that either. So that's where we met for the very first time. Now, here are our first officers, and you see that our first president was Mr. Bogie. Bodge. I'll get it right by the end of the presentation. Yeah, and as you can see, we had a man. Here are the 29 charter members, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to look at these because there are a few things I'd point out. There were many husband and wife teams that were interested in being in the garden club. Several names that I'm sure ring a bell with many of you, like the Merrimans, Alexander, Dunnings, Pennell, I don't know if I'm... Pennell, okay. Pinkham, yes. Mrs. Esther Merriman, she comes into play several times, and Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence Merriman. That's Clara Merriman, and Ruthie tells me she used to be the postmaster here in Harpswell. She was also the longtime historian for the club, and she put together a scrapbook that is missing. And so if we ever come across that, it's going to be a treasure trove, I know. So you wonder, what was the first thing that these 29 charter members decided to do? Well, it was a flower show. They decided to have a flower show, and it was held at the Improvement Hall. And according to one of the yearbooks from Ruthie's collection, it was one of the most successful the club ever held. In this photo from 1937, you'll note that this show was held at the Auburn Colony. And according to Ruthie Weeks, many of our early members had summer homes at the colony. And this particular show was directed by Mrs. Samuel Brown of Long Island, and she was a summer resident of the colony. Now, I'd also point out that even though she was a summer resident, she went on in 1938 to become president of our club. So in those days, you didn't have to be a year-round resident to step forward and say, I'll be president of the Harpswell Garden Club. Now, in this article, you can see that garden club flower shows across the state of Maine were prolific. In this particular year, Harpswell had a 2-day show in August, and as you see, I put at the bottom, this is from July 29th, 1945. This is not a floral design from the 1930s, but I thought it was a lovely design, and I wanted to show you the caliber of work that was done by members of our club. The date on this is 1994. Now, in this photo, you're going to see that flower shows were not just for women. I found notations in many of Ruthie's yearbooks that showed that men were involved for many, many years. And this is John Stone, and you can't see in his left hand, but he's got a rosette, a red ribbon. He was, I found another picture, he won the designer award in the men's division. And I also want to point out, let's see if I can do this. Okay, he has a pick, an axe, and a hammer. Now, I don't know what the theme was that year of the flower show, but I thought it was pretty interesting. As I point out here, records of our early years are missing, but the club always had a flower show for 47 years, until 1978. And that year they had what they called a horticultural fair, and it was split between the Union Church and Centennial Hall. And looking back in Ruthie's yearbooks, they tended to use Union Church and Centennial Hall a lot for their flower shows, and they'd be split between the two places. Sometimes they'd also use the Old Town Meeting House here. But I also wanted to point out that our flower shows always had a children's division, as well as a division for men. So we used to do a lot of things with children. Now, getting back to the 1930s, you can see that Mr. Bodge, Mr. B, he stepped down as president, and Mrs. Alice Daggett Swan took his place. Now, in 1933, the Harpswell Club decided to join the newly formed Garden Club Federation of Maine and the National Council of State Garden Clubs, which is now known as National Garden Clubs, Inc. I just took this picture. I had the opportunity to go to St. Louis for a national board meeting, and this is in the lobby of the National Garden Club's headquarters. And this is woven, their symbol is woven into the rug. So I thought, I got to have a picture of this for this presentation. And what they also have, it's not a part of this presentation, but I took a picture of all the states that I've lived in over the years, including Maine. And Maine's has a chickadee in it and a pine cone. So it's all of the seals of the states represent something about the state. Now, you might wonder, what were the burning issues back in the 1930s in the garden world? And again, this is one of the slides from the LBJ Presidential Library. And it was highway beautification. Here in Maine, you can thank garden clubs for getting rid of the billboards, because this was a big campaign back in the 1930s. This is 1938, I think, is the date on this. But you can see how the roads used to look with all the signs. And here's another one that says Maine leads states in battle to place ban on roadside signs. I also want to point out that in this article you can tell that in the previous, when the garden clubs commanded a large presence in the headlines. Anymore today, it's hard to even get our meeting announced at times. So, We're now into the 1940s, and again, as I said before, the early records are missing since that scrapbook is gone. But what I've been able to find of the early 40s isn't much except to say that Mrs. Merriman stepped down as secretary-treasurer, and I put this in because it's noted in the yearbooks that only 2 people held that job for the first 18 years of our clubs. And here is Anne Frances Hodgkins. We could probably do a whole program on what she was involved with, but I will just say that she was a native of Harpswell, and she was the daughter of a sea captain. She and her family oftentimes traveled all over the world with her father as he delivered cargo on his sailing ship. Miss Anne, as she was better known, was a force to be reckoned with in the town of Harpswell, and especially in the Harpswell Garden Club. And you can see she's got the pearls on, and so I brought my old pearls that I don't wear anymore, and I put it on the mannequin over here. She was a nationally accredited Master Flower Show judge, and she helped to spearhead the early preservation movement in Harpswell while a member of our club. Now, in a magazine article you'll see a little bit later, it mentions that she was an executive secretary to Mr. Bodge, who you remember was our first president in 1931. Now, both of them lived in New York at one time, and so maybe they knew each other then. I'm not sure. But I put Anne in at this point because she made her mark on the club starting in the 1940s. This is what we were involved with in the 1940s, during World War II. Victory gardens, growing and preserving food, growing flowers to beautify the community, and taking flowers to hospitalized veterans. And as I note here, the club was known for its therapy work, and I have got to think it was garden therapy at Togus Veterans Hospital, and we even hosted a flower show there. Now, as we're here into the spring of 1946, and as the war is ending, this is when Anne Frances Hodgkins decides to form the Civic Committee. Their first formal function is Harpswell Day, and they also started yearly art shows. And these became annual events to raise funds for the Civic Committee. And I just want to mention that with Harpswell Day, in those days, these type of events like Harpswell Day and art shows were a big social affair for the community. Harpswell Day would involve a luncheon, exhibits, speaker, and oftentimes an organ concert. And I saw once where they had it here at the Kellogg Church. They would use the improvement hall, the Old Town Meeting House, and they'd try and move many things around that day. So it sounds like it must have been an all-day affair. And back then, they charged admission to these things. Now, you ask, why were we raising funds? Well, the first project was the restoration of the gravestones in the burial ground at Harpswell Center near the Town Meeting House. The second project was to beautify the War Memorial. Another project was preserving the Town Meeting House. Now, Miss Anne, I'm going to call her, became president of the club, but at the same time she was chairing the Civic Committee. And I found a notation that her theme was that we should be concerned with preservation and improvement of the town's beauty. And at the time when she was president, dues were 50 cents, but they also had an initiation fee of 50 cents. As far as I can tell, restoring the Union Church was the first major project of the Garden Club. And if you had a chance to see any of the articles on the table, there's a lot written about it that I've been able to find with the help of the reference librarian at the Portland Press, or at the Portland Library. And different articles tended to say that it had been abandoned since a certain time, but looking back through some records, it looks like it was abandoned in the 1920s. This is a copy of Anne Frances Hodgkins' diary. The original of her diaries are with the Harpswell Historical Society. They keep them in the vault. But in the Civic Committee records, I found this. And in this, she talks about September 7th, 1950, 10 of us meet at North Harpswell Church today to see what could be done. And she talks about seeing a Mr. Bill Barnes and looking like he's going to cooperate, I guess, she says. This is an early photo of the church that was given to me by June and Ed Finney. And if you look at the church, and I don't know what the date on this is, but you can see the left-hand window is completely covered by shutters. Today, that's not the way it is. This is an article from 1950 about the beginning of the restoration of the Union Church. And you'll see that it was originally called the Union Meeting House. Now, before they could start the restoration, they had to track down the heirs of the 11 original pew holders. If you had a chance on the table over here, and I'll come to this in a little bit, they put together what was called a document of intent, and it was signed on Christmas Day, 1840. And all these gentlemen got together and said that they wanted to build the Union Meeting House. Now, according to a news article that I found, it said there were also 11 civic committee members involved with the hunt. And they were able to find heirs to 10 of the original 11 pew holders. And in this article, it says Mrs. Donald Potter was identified as the owner of pew number 1. Now, they had to go through a window to get access so they could start restoration. This is a copy of the document of intent, and I know you're not going to be able to read that, but I put a translation over on the table if you got a chance to see it. And you can see who some of the early people were. There's the Merrimans, the Dunnings, Pennell, am I saying that correctly? Lots of names in there. Merriman, there's several Merrimans in there. In October 1950 is when the restoration begins. And all the facts that I've put here are taken from newspaper accounts from the 1950s, because the civic committee records that we have only date back to 1976. So somewhere there are more civic committee records possibly. But what I've been able to piece together from these news articles was that the chandelier that you see in the church today was saved by a gentleman by the name of John Allen. And in the first year, what they did was they wanted to make the church weather-tight. So they repaired the roof. There was a tin ceiling that was hanging from the original plaster. They took the tin ceiling down, and they replaced 72 panes of glass. Here are other dates that I wanted you to know about from the history of the Union Church. And again, some of these are from her diary, but she notes the Union Church is open for the town's bicentennial celebration. They were really working hard to make that date. And they had a rededication August 24th, 1958, and they started having Vesper services. Here's the church as it looks today. I'd point out that the granite slabs that you can barely see were hauled by an ox team from Pennellville when the church was built. They're up to 10 feet long by 30 inches wide by 8 inches thick. And when the restoration began, some of the slabs had to be straightened. Now, I wonder who here today would want to volunteer for that job. Looking at the front doors, an article that I found from the Portland Press Herald dated 1952 describes the doors as double 10-panel Christian doors, flanked by pilasters of simple but good design, and that was their wording. I also want to point out that I found a photo that I haven't included today. This was when we were doing the 911E institution here in getting it going in Harpswell. This church, Union Church, is 553 Harpswell Neck Road, but we took off the 553, I'm sure, just so it wouldn't destroy the look. Here we are looking inside the church today. Here we are looking to the rear of the choir loft, and I want you to see the organ in the choir loft. It was noted in a 1969 article in the Brunswick Times Record that the organ is a reed organ. Now, it used to sit in the front of the church and was sitting on some of the doors from the pews. All the pew doors apparently had been taken off. The doors were acting as a platform, but during the restoration, the organ was moved back to the choir loft, and the pew doors were restored and put back on the pews. The article also said that a minister could tell the crowd to stand up, turn around, and face the music when the organ played. So I don't know if that's where that term started, but that's what it said. Now, the pews are made of pumpkin pine with black walnut trim, and they're numbered 1 through 34. All the doors were found, as well as the brass trim, when the restoration began, and the doors had been taken off and stored in the loft, but the Civic Committee restored them to their original look. And the committee had to strip the pews down to the bare wood and then repainted them white, as the original plans called for. Here we're looking at the pulpit, and it's solid mahogany with a base painted to look like black onyx. Here's the kerosene chandelier. At one point, it had been removed, but as I mentioned earlier, it had been saved and refurbished. When the Civic Committee broke into the church, as I mentioned earlier, they found the ceiling was cracked underneath the tin ceiling, so they had to redo the plaster. But as you can see from this photo today, the ceiling has been completely restored to its original beauty. Now, looking a little closer at the chandelier, the Civic Committee found 6 of the original 12 lamps. They found another 5 lamps in Kezar Falls. I don't know how, but I found that in a news article. So that left just 1 to be replaced. And if you're in the front, you can see this better. But you can see that the bottom of this one is different from this one. This is more filigree. But when you're standing on the floor of the church, I don't think many people would see that. I took a closer look a couple weeks ago. I got the key from Lynn Reiner, and the old reed organ was manufactured by the C.P. Carpenter Company in Brattleboro, Vermont, and it has a certificate of authenticity dated September 8th, 1899, and it still plays today. As I mentioned before, when the club members tried to get into the church, they had no key, and so they went in through a window. This is the key that Lynn Reiner has today that she uses to open the church when we show it to prospective brides and their families. Lynn thought that this might be an original key, but Mary Maroney and I had a conversation, and we're really not sure. But I think it looks pretty old myself. As I mentioned earlier, they had annual Vesper services, and this one is from 2000. And the Vesper services were always a joint celebration with the Harpswell Garden Club, the community, and with members of the U.S. Navy from the Brunswick Naval Air Station. This is the plaque found on the outside of the church and shows it's been placed on the National Register of Historic Places. And as I mentioned earlier, that Linda DeHaan had found this in her drawer as she was getting ready to move and gave it to Peggy, and now we have it. And I was thinking it probably should go to the Harpswell Historical Society for safekeeping now, or safer keeping. There's a copy of this also as you go into the Union Church right inside the doors. This is an article I found from the Portland Press Herald talking about the restoration of the church. One thing I want to point out is right here. It says that $3,500 had been expended so far. A lot of work was donated to restore the church. And so, but $3,500 back in those days was probably a lot of money. And this is the most recent article about the Union Church and about our winning the Historic Preservation Award. So I just had to put a plug in for that. And here's our trophies. This is the one, this is called the May Duff Walters Preservation of Beauty Award given by the National Garden Clubs. And I was able to be in Louisville when they awarded this to the Garden Club Federation of Maine, and when they announced the Harpswell Garden Club, I literally went through the floor. So it was great to be there.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you. And we also got this year the Longfellow Picture for Preservation of Beauty Award from the Garden Club Federation of Maine. Now, Anne Frances Hodgkins chaired the Civic Committee for 25 years. And over those years, the Civic Committee had their hand in many other projects, some big and some small. And over the years, they raised a lot of money. This is the most recent article I found just this past Saturday at the Brunswick Curtis Memorial Library. And I had, looking back through, I was trying to, tie up all the loose ends for this presentation. And I found a notation that I think it was John Stone or someone had written that said that Miss Ann used to put a brass kettle by the door. Right there it is. And as you can see, it says they raised $20,000 in that brass kettle. Now, I don't know if Ruthie told me this or Priscilla Davis, but what Miss Ann used to do is she put some money of her own in the brass kettle, and she'd put it by the door. And so when people came or left, they'd say, "Oh, somebody's put some money in," and so they would put money in. So it's kind of like, yeah. But yeah, we can still do that today. Okay. After going through all the records I can find, I wanted to do a list of everything I could find that the Civic Committee either started or played a role in. And there are a lot of things, so I'm going to let you look at these because we have a few more slides just like this.
Wow. That's really the heart of the garden club. Parkview Hospital.
Yes, I heard somebody say Parkview Hospital. Yes, indeed. We did some landscaping in the early days at Parkview Hospital. We started the Harpswell Historical Society in 1978. I don't know how many of you knew that. Yep, Dave Hackett told me that. And I found a letter, which isn't a part of this, but he had written to Marcy McGuire after we moved to Centennial Hall with the Historical Society, saying, sometimes great relationships start. And wasn't it wonderful when the Garden Club started the Historical Society in 1978? Here's some more. We restored the Hearst House at the Town Common, yes indeed. And on the contributed funds to the American Land Trust, Harpswell being the top contributor, that was amongst Maine garden clubs. I don't have in this presentation, but in Ruthie's collection, she has a picture of she and her son when he was little, and they were planting a tree at the West Harpswell School. And here's the last one. So if you think we've been busy for the past few years, we can't even hold a candle, I think, into what the Civic Committee of the Garden Club did in 25 years and then some. Now, there were other things going on in the Garden Club at the time, but to show you what a powerful force the Civic Committee was at the time, they had their own chairman, they had their own secretary, and they had their own treasurer. And Priscilla Davis made a comment to me when I was talking to her. She said, it was almost like the tail that wagged the dog. But I do want to point out that the Civic Committee was made up at the time of a lot of prominent men from here in Harpswell. Now, it wasn't all work and no play in the club. Here's an article from December 14th, 1964, where Miss Ann is hosting a Christmas tea at her home called Fairhaven. And we made the society pages on several occasions. And as you can see, this was a dress-up affair. This one I had to put in because there's our own Ruthie there. This is from Ruthie's collection. It's a good thing she holds on to things. This again was at the Christmas tea at Miss Ann's house.
Oh my God, John.
I don't know who John McGee is, but he's in there too.
No, I mean, Mrs. John.
Oh, Jenny's on the other side.
Yeah, she's on the other side. Yeah, the gentleman is H. Leighton Jackson of Brunswick, if anybody knows him. Now, to raise money for civic projects besides the brass kettle, we always had yearly art shows, and sometimes they were one-man shows. This is a program that Ruth had in her collection that showed Forrest Orr having a one-man show that ran for 10 days. Here's some more publicity that I got from Ruthie, and this was for our flower show in 1967 called This Singing World, and it was the club's 36th show. And if you look on the column on the right, you'll see a lot of names you might recognize. Mrs. Garland Davis, that's Priscilla, and Miss Ann was still with us. Mrs. Paul Burbank. Paul Burbank is well known in the Navy because he was one of the first Navy pilots ever commissioned as a pilot. There's a bench in the Chapel Gardens in the Friendship Garden that's dedicated to him. And here we have from Ruth's installation as president and Priscilla as first vice president. So that's Ruthie and that's Priscilla right there. And I don't know any of the others, but Ruthie, you're still back there, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Still alive.
Good. You might be able to identify some of these other people.
Ruth Darby
Darrell, she was the chairman of the flower show.
in the middle.
And as you see, it says Dr. Clarence Hatch was unable to be president, but he was the treasurer. And here's Ruthie's membership card. Now, this is another article from Ruth's collection announcing her installation, and the theme of Harpswell Day that year was "Those Were the Days, Celebrating Summer Boarders." And you might see at the bottom of the left column, it says 23 new members were welcomed to the club. Membership now totals more than 280.
Goodness.
That was the 35th anniversary year of the club, 280 members.
The husbands added up.
The husbands had Oh, I guess I better sign Bill up tonight then.
The dues have just been increased to $2 a year.
Yes. Yeah.
Our husbands to join.
This is a photo, an article, again from Ruthie's collection. And it talks about the theme of Harpswell Day being Harpswell Looks Forward and Back. And it also mentions the planting of a yellow Alaskan cedar tree near the town common. Now, the adults on the left is Miss Ann and Ruthie's on the right. The children are Pam Carney on the left and Kim Hurst.
In Carrollton County, I think is still a member of the club.
Yeah,
Kim Hurst is Nancy and Wayne's daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. What I want to point out is that the tree had been made possible through the efforts of Senator Margaret Chase Smith, who was a longtime honorary member of the Harpswell Garden Club. She had a summer home in Cundy's Harbor. Now, look, I want you to look at the tree and the plaque. Here it is today. Bill and I went over and took a picture this summer because I wanted to find this tree. And the tree sits in front of the stone wall that runs along the old burial ground. So it's grown a bit in 56 years. Yeah, a yellow Alaskan cedar. And there's the plaque underneath it. So we had a 4-H club called the Harpswell Red Wing Club back in 1959. This is Ruthie's letter appealing for people to renew their membership and announcing some upcoming events. And you'll see that dues went, as Ruthie just said, from $1 to $2. And membership was over 300 people. But you'll also see that Ruth was faced with the same problems that we face today. Not enough people taking responsibility to help with the club activities. Now, does that sound familiar to you? I also want to point out that right here, she says the annual garden party will be on Friday, June 21st. Looking back through Ruthie's yearbooks, we had a garden party just about every year. And we celebrated our birthday every year. Now, moving on, the next major project that was taken on by the Civic Committee was the Memorial Garden at the Brunswick Naval Air Station. And at the time, and for many, many years, even since I've been a member, it was believed to be the only garden created by a civilian garden club on an active duty military installation in the entire country. So that was a claim to fame for us. This letter, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at it in the scrapbooks over here, this is the original letter that Anne Frances Hodgkins typed, talking about how the chapel gardens came to be. And in this letter, she talks about, she was friends with Chaplain William Hunter, who I think went on to become a pastor here at the Kellogg Church.
His wife was the president of the Garden Club at one time.
Was she? Okay. Ruthie says his wife was president at one time. And so while he was still chaplain at the Navy base, Miss Ann was over there one day saying, boy, you need some landscaping over here, because it was a brand new chapel at the time in the 60s. And he said, yes, we do. And she said, well, I think I know where we can find some money with the garden club. And so the rest, as they say, is history. One of the tragic things that happened as they were working on the memorial garden was that 2 aircraft from the air station were shot down over Vietnam in 1968. So the garden was a rallying point to support the Navy and the community as its creation moved forward. And I was telling Anne Laborde, if you see right down here, the 2 plaques that were made for this commemoration of the beginning of the memorial garden were made by the men of the USS Bushnell. Now, their captain was Captain David Purinton from Brunswick. And Bill and I have talked about this, and it turns out that his mom christened the USS Bushnell.
My mom.
His mom, no, yeah, in San Francisco. It was a submarine tender, so is this a small world?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Miss Ann knew a lot of people, and she knew Professor Lyle Littlefield. And if anybody here is a University of Maine graduate, they know who Lyle Littlefield is. He was the preeminent professor of horticulture at the University of Maine. And the Lyle Littlefield ornamental trail gardens are named after him at the University of Maine. He was tapped to design the memorial garden, along with another gentleman from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now here's the early picture I talked about when Miss Ann said, you know, boy, this could use some landscaping. And this is from 1968. This is the memorial garden in more recent times. The armillary was donated on behalf of Squadron VP-26, and they were the squadron that lost those 2 airplanes over Vietnam. The plaque in front of the armillary is actually dedicated to Marines from the state of Maine. This is a bench, a memorial bench in the memorial garden. And this plaque sits on a very large boulder as you first come into the memorial garden. That bench that I just pointed out to you, this is on the inside arm of it, dedicated again to another squadron, VP-44, who crashed off the North African coast in June 3rd, 1972. So squadrons from Brunswick Naval Air Station served all over the world, and they were lost in different parts of the world. But those planes were attached to the Brunswick Naval Air Station. This is a photo from the Memorial Garden's dedication on June 16th, 1968. Now, in 1972, Miss Ann decides that she wants to start another garden on the base, and because of the way the new chapel was designed, it had 2 courtyard wings. And so one wing had the Memorial Garden, the other one had the Friendship Garden. And this was meant to celebrate the relationship between the Navy and its surrounding communities. In March of 1972, Anne sent out a letter asking her friends to support the second garden. This is an article in 1974 about Miss Anne, and it talks about the whole idea of putting together these two gardens. She died in 1972 before she could see the garden finished and dedicated. Many of you might know Rear Admiral retired Harry Rich. Harry's a big supporter of the gardens and of the garden club. And so here he is addressing the crowd at a rededication one year. And here we have Jean Gilliam and Harry and Senator Margaret J. Smith wearing her traditional red rose. And that's taken in the Memorial Garden. So if any of you have been in the Memorial Garden, you can tell the plantings there are very young. I'm sorry, that's in the Friendship Garden. Forgive me. This is a letter that Margaret J. Smith sent to Anne, saying that she hoped to get to see her, but she couldn't come until May, and the letter's dated March 30th. But as it turns out, Anne died before they could get together. This letter, the original, is in the Chapel Garden scrapbook. Here we have some of our members attending one of the more recent ceremonies. And the gals in the blue are the chapel ringers from First Parish Church. The parish ringers and Ray Cornells would always, if they were available, they'd play for our services. The fountain, you see, was commissioned by the Garden Club as a gift to the Navy. It was done by Trudy Gilliam, an artist from the Virgin Islands, and it was called A Splash of Water. It's made of copper and brass and was presented by the Garden Club to the Navy in 1980. And this is a plaque you see when you enter the Friendship Garden. And I had to put a picture of Gary in here because Gary was the longtime chair of the Navy Chapel Gardens when I joined, and then I took her place. And here we are at last year's cleanup. Had to put one of these in. And we cleaned a lot of leaves last year. Now, we're in 1970 now, and I want to say we jumped into the big time when we were featured in a long article in Down East Magazine. And thank you to Linda Clement, who gave me this issue of Down East Magazine a few years ago, Linda, I think it was. This is 1971. And it's quite a long article, and it's over on the table. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. But it talks about a lot of the accomplishments of our club. And it talks here about our membership was 340 in 1971, but we were only the third largest garden club in the state of Maine at 340 people. In this picture, I wanted to point out Arthur Clayton. Miss Ann is on the left, and Arthur is on the right there. And for those of you who don't know Arthur Clayton, and I wasn't around then, he was quite a gardener, and Miss Ruth Weeks back there has told me that he was a very well-known organic gardener and might have been the first organic gardener in Harpswell. We'll now move on to the last of the major projects of the Civic Committee, and first we explore what was first called Anne Frances Hodgkins Park. The club acquired 2 acres for $1 from the Allen family in 1962. And it was supposed to be, originally thought to be, a park and an arboretum. And there's the plaque that's in Anne's garden. And she was alive to see this dedicated October 29th, 1970. And here I talked about, for many years it only had plantings in the plaque. But there came a time when the garden club was worried about Centennial Hall. And Centennial Hall was where we had a lot of meetings. The owner of the land, and I think his name, Peg, remind me, but I think it was Mr. Johnson. Was
Ed Thompson.
Ed Thompson, okay, Ed Thompson. He wanted to do something completely different with his land. And so the hall had to be moved if it was going to be saved. And so here we are, moving Centennial Hall. Peg was there. Yeah.
Walking right next to
Yeah, Peg Newberg, our member here. Peg, were you, what was your position then? Were you president of the Historical Society?
Yes, and we bought it for $1. But early in the evening, David and I were saying that before he approached me, he approached David, the fire department,
Yes.
and said he wanted to know if they wanted to burn it. They would take it on as a
Training?
activity,
Yeah.
fire activity.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was called Centennial Hall because it was built to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the founding of our country, 1876. And it was actually, the way it was purchased was townspeople bought shares in it. And so, in effect, the town people owned it, but it was on Mr. Thompson's land. Okay.
And he gave us a very short window to move it. And it came down the road in 3 parts. The roof,
Yes,
the
and
building in half, and it came down on 3 different sections.
yes, and we've got pictures of this. And this is from Mary Maroney's extensive collection. Thank you, Mary. So, July 1995, Centennial Hall is moved to its new location, the Anne Francis Hodgkins Park. This project was a joint effort of the Harpswell Historical Society and the Harpswell Garden Club. Here we are, moving it on to a foundation had to be dug and formed there. Here's the roof arriving. And this one I call, this gives new meaning to the phrase raising the roof. These are great pictures, Mary. I'm so glad you have these. And here's another angle. And now the building is put together, and you can see the ramp has already been built, and now we're getting ready, it looks like, to dig in. Here's the front, and that's Val. Val, is that you? Yeah, I think, yeah, Val's in the back here.
Yes, that might be.
Yeah. What year was this? 1995. July 1995 is when the building was moved.
She said it could have been.
Could have been Val? I thought it was Val. I thought it looks like Val.
It is Val, it's definitely Val.
Yeah.
Is that the inception of our garden, Mary?
No, that came later, 1998 or 9. You would know better, Val.
Val's in the corner. Now, we did make the front page of the Times Record, so we did make news from time to time. And lest you think all the work to move this building and begin the design and planting of the gardens was free, think again. A major fundraising drive had to be implemented by the Historical Society and the Garden Club. We tried to raise $200,000. And Peg, do you know how much was raised by chance?
I don't know what the final figure was. The immediate concern was $20,000 to pay Mr. Cobb. And we got that from John Dunlap and Mr. Porter.
Rob
Gave
Porter.
us the initial $20,000, but I don't know what the final figure. I'd have to look that up.
Okay. And here we are today at the entrance garden, and with our nice sign there that says "Gardens maintained by the Harpswell Garden Club." Now, with the gardens, they're broken up into different gardens. We have the entrance garden, Anne Francis Hodgkin's garden, Currier's garden, named after Currier McEwen, Jean's garden, named after former President Jean Gilliam, the shade garden, the porch garden, and the cutting garden. Each of these gardens has a member who volunteers to oversee one particular garden, and then we have a member who oversees the entire park. In Mary's notebook, I wanted to try and put all the different gardens in, but I knew I wasn't going to have enough time to do all of this, so I'm just going to put a few in. This is cleanup day, and I think this is Sherry Holt right there. And I couldn't do this presentation unless I had Mary on her
There she is.
You look fetching, my
Thanks, Suzanne.
Mary, I love your coveralls. Those are,
I like the hat.
yeah.
Yes.
And this is when we could still do plant sales before the winter moth came. As you can tell, we've got a lot of plants back there. What I've done with the next few slides, and these are from my collection, is just to show you some candid shots, just to show you that not every cleanup day is a dry, sunny day. And here's how we use the gardens in Centennial Hall at times today. This is from one of our white elephant sales. And here is Miss Pat. Pat got us into the white elephant sales, and we're doing quite well with them, I think. And I know that Pat was really enthusiastic about doing white elephant sales because the Midcoast Hospital Auxiliary sale, which she and her hubby have been part of for many, many years, is so successful. So that's how we got started down this road. And here's some of our hardworking volunteers at a fall sale. These probably look familiar to somebody. In the fall of 2014, we were really fortunate to have Linda Nelson, the National Garden Club president, visiting Maine, and she stayed with Bill and I at our house. And so the next morning, I brought her over, and Becky and I met, and so we brought her to Centennial Hall to the gardens because I wanted her to see what kind of work we did. She was really impressed. And we also had celebrations here at Centennial Hall. This is the birthday cake celebrating Currier McEwen's 100th birthday.
In the rain.
In the rain.
Yeah.
We got rained on, he was under the cover.
Yep, there he is, looking out over the gardens. And here's the commemorative stone that bears his name in his garden. Now, as far as I can tell, the moving of Centennial Hall and developing the gardens was the last major project that the Civic Committee was involved in before it finally dissolved. And looking back through the records and through Ruthie's yearbooks, it looks like the Civic Committee kind of scaled back in 1997, because in 1997 our yearbooks now show we have a properties chairman, and the first properties chairman was Don Almy. But these were other things that we did. We have been very important in the conservation movement in the early days. We were involved with Stover's Point Wildlife Preserve, and I had over on the table the Harpswell Heritage Land Trust now oversees that, but they have a nice article about that. And we took care of that from 1971 to the year 2000, 29 years. The Merriman Pond Wildflower Preserve, the Goodwin property that's just adjacent to it.
And we bought that in 2001 and built our house.
Yes.
yes.
That's where Sue now
Thank you.
lives.
Yeah.
And we raise money to send children to attend camp. Mast Landing Camp, Ruthie will tell you, that's in Freeport. She used to drive the kids to Mast Landing Camp. In Bryant Pond and Tanglewood, we now send them there with a partnership with the Mary Meeting Audubon Society. We also cared for at least two town cemeteries, the Miriam Stover Thomas Cemetery and the James W. Wilson Cemetery. And there's also mention made of cleaning up Graveyard Point, which Becky tells me she can see from her house, and the town burial ground. And of course, we worked with the town of Harpswell to develop the gardens at the town office. And here we are at the town office. And thanks to Peggy Chandler for these pretty pictures in the spring. There's another one. Before the deer had a chance to get the tulips. And this is another photo when Linda Nelson, the national president, was here in Harpswell. I called Christy and I said, Christy, our national president is here. Can I bring her by to meet you and to see the garden? So Christy said, absolutely, because Christy is a big fan of the Harpswell Garden Club. So she said some really nice things to Linda about what the garden club means to the town of Harpswell. And now everybody who goes to the town office now knows who tends to these gardens. So thanks to Peggy for spearheading this one. Last few photos, I want to tell you about the generosity we've had of many members of the community and from our members. But we also continue the tradition that was started by Jean Gilliam in 1968, providing flowers from our gardens for our weddings. This is a plaque that's inside the Union Church. And Jean started this in 1968 when the mother of a bride had approached her about having a wedding in the Union Church, and she mentioned that needed some flowers. And so that's how the Wedding Flower and Restoration Committee started. That was its early name. Here we have Val. Val, of course, is former president and longtime chair of the wedding committee. You can't see, but in the background, Buff Harrington is back there. Hard to see, but I thank Val for provided me with some pictures that I put in here. And here's some of us. Recently, of course, Lynn Reiner is now the chair. And I think this is when we did Peg Bonarigo's daughter's wedding at the Union Church. Yeah. And here's Chris Millar and
Shirley Spade.
yeah. This is one of Val's photos.
That's Bridie and Jerry Miller.
Who's that?
Jerry used to be principal of Brunswick High School.
Okay.
This is his daughter.
Okay, he used to be president principal of Brunswick High School and his daughter. And Val, did you do the bouquet?
We did.
Did you? Beautiful, beautiful.
She wanted peonies
She wanted peonies.
in the Chinese tradition.
She wanted peonies in the Chinese tradition, is what Val said.
And it was an off-site wedding.
Ah.
It was in Kennebunk.
Oh, in Kennebunk. I put a couple of these in because I wanted you to know that not every bride is local. This gal, and her name escapes me right now, but she lived in Boston, and she and her fiance came to our house because she wanted to see my dahlias a year before. And I said, I can't promise you what'll be in bloom for your wedding, but as it turns out, lots of dahlias were in bloom in my garden. And this bride is from Texas, and her husband was from Spain, and they both taught at University of Texas. And they had some kind of a connection. I think it was her grandparents summered in Harpswell, and that's how she ended up here. These were the flower girls from her wedding. I love this picture. And here's Jackie, bouquet maker extraordinaire. Jackie's here tonight. And here's the most recent wedding we did. Just kind of fooling around in Lynn's basement. That we're doing the arrangement, a lot of arrangements in Lynn's basement. And Sue, you probably remember this wedding. We do good work, I gotta tell you.
Oh, this is so neat.
And we did this one this summer, and it was a new member of the garden club who had been a member a few years ago, but her daughter got married, and her other daughter died before the sister could get married, and so the bicycle was the deceased sister's bicycle. And they wanted us to arrange the flowers in the basket so that when her sister put her bouquet aside, we had a tube in there so that she could put her bouquet in the flower basket as if her sister was holding her bouquet.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that was the sentiment that they had. It was quite a beautiful day that day. And I just want to point out, we do big arrangements and we do small arrangements. But one thing we do is we make the brides and grooms very happy. Now, this last few slides, I just wanted to point out a few things you may not know about some of our members. And I put an article by the door here. We had a member in 1938 who was famous. She had a cherry tree growing in her yard in York, Pennsylvania. And it was different from any cherry tree she had ever seen. And it was growing near a cherry tree she already had there. So she received a patent on that cherry tree, patent 188. And as you can see, she gave subsequent trees to the Arnold Arboretum and the National Cathedral. And she was the great-great-niece of President George Washington.
Oh my goodness.
And the Harpswell Garden Club was the only garden club she belonged to, according to this article.
Wow.
Yeah. And Bill reminds me, I was trying to remember that little phrase, you know, when you're a kid, I cannot tell a lie, I chopped down the cherry tree. What George Washington said. So I thought, well, maybe as a penance, his distant relatives decided to patent a new cherry tree. And there's the article. Yeah, if you didn't have a chance to read the article, it's quite interesting. This gal, and her name was Neville. That was her first name, not her husband's. She was a member of the Royal Order of the Garter and all kinds of things. It's all in that article.
And that article was written by the woman who
Wrote.
what we said tonight.
Yeah, the Gardener's Colic.
The
Yeah.
Gardener's Colic.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Learning a lot tonight, I know here. And here's some other interesting facts.
And what is his name again, Suzanne?
I'm not going there. I think I called him Samuel at one time, but it's really James. His name was James. Mrs. Samuel Brown founded the Flower Show Judging School of the National Council of State Garden Clubs. That's a big deal. Their whole floral design program is a really big part of the National Garden Club, and to think that one of our members founded the school.
And she also was president of that organization. That's
Was
all I
she?
think we know.
Okay. Arthur Clayton, as I mentioned earlier, was of African American and Indian heritage. Howard Brooks was a horticultural therapist. Tony Tedesco, if you know anything about floral design,
Oh, yeah.
Tony is an internationally known floral designer and NGC Master Flower Show judge, and he was a member for 1 year of our club, 1978. Now, I've been sending, when I found this out, I was looking through the Civic Committee records. They had a list of new members for 1978, and I just happened to glance at it, and I thought, that can't be the same Tony Tedesco. So I Googled him on the internet, and I saw that he lives in Stowe, Massachusetts, and he has a studio down there. So I emailed him and introduced myself and told him what I was doing. And he wrote back to say, yeah, I have summer property at Stover Point. He still owns summer property here. But in this article I found about him, he created 5 brand new floral designs that the NGC uses today. He's also working on a new floral design textbook for the NGC. So really, I mean, it's incredible who's been a member of our club. And of course, Courier McEwen, who is Ann Stanridge, is his daughter. And Ann provided me some things tonight on the table, a beautiful photo of her dad and some of his books. But he was known for the first yellow Siberian iris butter and sugar. And I just got my recent Garden Gate magazine, and in the very back page, there's a picture of butter and sugar.
Oh.
So I thought, wow. And on the internet it says he developed more than 160 Siberian and Japanese iris in his lifetime. And Ann will tell you that he got into this hobby when the mailman mistakenly left him a garden catalog. Yeah. And here we have Senator Margaret J. Smith. This was inside of one of Ruthie's yearbooks. And it says, "With pride in being a member of the Harpswell Garden Club, Senator Margaret J. Smith." And when I was talking to Priscilla Davis about, what I was doing, she says, "Do we still have the silver bowl that Margaret J. Smith gave the garden club?" And of course I said, "What silver bowl?" So somewhere in Harpswell, maybe, sitting on someone's buffet, there's a silver bowl from Margaret J. Smith that belongs to the garden club. And again, the Down East Magazine article is a very long article. They featured us in June of 1971. And I put in the end here that our club has produced 3 state presidents.
Including yours truly.
Yeah. And Tony sent me this floral design, because I asked him, did you ever participate in any of the flower shows? And he didn't say, but he just sent me this design. So I thought, okay, well, maybe he did. I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. Yeah. Now, just wanted to point out a couple things. These were early yearbooks of Ruthie's, and we had a lot of different covers in the early years. And oftentimes, there were pictures of people they were dedicated to. But now, the one on the left, I know you're familiar with the iris. Mary and Barbara Rosenberg, Mary Maroney and Barbara Rosenberg, designed this, and it reflects the hybridizing work of the late Dr. Currier McEwen. And it was made the official logo of the club in 1996. What you may not know is the one on the right. It was done by Drew Miller of Bailey Island, and I guess he was Clee's husband, maybe? Yeah. Was he? Okay. He designed this in 1978, and it was meant to reflect both the gardens of our members and Harpswell's heritage of ships and the sea. And Mary and I were looking at this, and not to make light of it, but if you ever look at the Hannaford grocery bag, it reminds you a little bit of the one on the right. But I think it's lovely anyway. Yeah. And now, as we're approaching our 85th anniversary, I just want to put this sentiment in here that we've had a lot of fun over the years and done a lot of things. And here at the end, I just put a montage in of just a few photos.
Oh.
That's at our house.
Yeah. I told Anna I had a picture of her, so I'm glad she's here tonight. It's a wonderful picture.
You didn't spell my name right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll take it back and change it.
Salome.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you put an E on it, yeah.
Okay, I'll fix it. And garden party down on Bailey Island. Lovely hat. I wish June could be here tonight to see it.
That's a pretty one of June.
Yeah. Here we had a big group this summer go to Portland Headlight and have a great field trip.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lovely day.
One of our many teas. Betty, glad you're here tonight to see those. And this was taken this summer. I had to stick this one in because some of the gals came down to support me when I was installed as president. And they had a wonderful garden tour. And so here we are kind of hanging out on the garden tour. And Ann's here tonight, and this I thought was a great one. And Ann, I love that bench.
Oh, yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. What's it made out of, by the way?
It's teak.
It's teak?
It weighs
Yeah.
10,000 pounds. Move it with a tractor or some very strong men.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's
Ellie.
nice.
Oh, really, Hunter?
That's a great picture.
Beautiful.
Oh.
I had to put this one in.
Ruthie.
There's Ruthie, there you are. And there we are.
Oh, that was nice.